and welcome to the BSG Trainees podcast. My name's Maya, and I'll be one of your hosts for this new series of episodes. Here with me in the studio is our second host.
Hi, I'm Maddie. Thanks very much to everyone for listening and joining us here for another season.
It all rises and falls on the interview.
Watching endoscopy is really important, rather than just like, let me add it, let me scope.
The projects that you say yes to that you think are going to result in a publication quite often don't.
You kind of don't realise how much stuff you've already done that is useful.
Before we start, Maya, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Maddie. So I'm one of the new BSG IMT trainee representatives, and I'm an IMT1 working at North Middlesex Hospital in North London. Prior to this, I spent 2 years in Melbourne, which was a bit of work and a lot of travel, and it was amazing. But now I'm back working as an IMT and dedicated on a career in gastroenterology.
I am also an IMT1, and similarly to Maya and probably half of you guys out there, I escaped to New Zealand for a couple of years before coming back to the UK. I had a very nice time for a few years, and now I'm back on the grind, having to start thinking about real life and my career. We're aiming these series at IMTs like us who have started to think about applying for gastro as a training speciality, but don't really know where to start.
If it's anything like applying for IMT, then it's got the potential to be massively overwhelming and really time-consuming. Our first episode today is based on the application and portfolio required to get a gastro training number, and then our second episode will be on the dreaded interview.
Not going to lie, it's so helpful, we almost didn't want to release it to you all as our future rivals.
But here we are. So Maddie, how are we going to approach this today?
So today we're going to hear from a number of ST4s and ST5s who've recently been through the application and interview process. Before we do that, we're going to just very quickly summarise the application process and what to expect.
I promise it won't take too long.
For those who've been through the IMT application process, it's really similar, so it should all feel quite familiar.
There's very detailed guidance on the application process online, and we'll include some useful links in the podcast show notes.
In summary, on the application, you complete a self-assessment against the scoring matrix with a maximum total score of 38 points.
The domains have recently been updated, and for 2025, they are postgraduate degrees, presentations, publications, teaching experience, training and teaching, quality improvement, and MRCP.
From the score you've given yourself, candidates are shortlisted for interview. Commitment to specialty is a section that doesn't score points in self-assessment, but is assessed in the interview.
So we'll be doing a 2-part mini-series on this process and speaking to trainees that have gone through the process themselves. We want to find out about the self-assessment domains, and in particular, the commitment to specialty, teaching, audits and publications. All
right, enough of us. Let's get some proper advice. We caught up with a group of gastro registrars at the BSG Live 2024, which took place in Birmingham earlier this summer.
So we began by speaking to Georgie. Hi, Georgie.
Hello.
Thanks for speaking to us today. Can you tell us a little bit about what stage of training you're in and where you're working and a bit about you?
Sure. So I am an ST4. I'm currently working at North Middlesex, which is in North Central and East London. I have done my IMT training in South London. So I did 3 years at St George's, which is a very nice place. And then I decided to take some time out because I felt very tired after being a medical SHO for such a long time. So I thought, okay, let me take a break. I applied for a clinical fellow post and got a senior clinical fellow role in liver ITU. And I spent a not very relaxed year working at King's in the liver ITU, but got a huge amount from that.
When did you start thinking about your application for an ST4 post?
So I was really lucky when I was an SHO in gastro, actually, that I had a very inspirational reg, Lulia. She kind of sat down with me really early and was like, you need to think about your application now. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't take an F3 year. I was like, I'm definitely going to take a break at some point. And she was like, no, it's never too early. So we sat down, we went through my portfolio kind of as it was and looked at the decision aid and to see what I already had that I could use as my points and what was I missing.
Yeah.
And then she was like, these are the things you should start thinking about now. And actually, I think that was the best advice that I ever had, because you kind of don't realise how much stuff you've already done that is useful. And then obviously no one wants to just be doing intense extracurricular stuff when you're already doing a really busy medical SHO rota as an IMT.
Yeah, this is something we definitely agree with.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing all this extracurricular stuff at the moment with our busy SHO rota. One of the things that we wanted to ask Georgie was about gastro-specific things being on the CV, and we asked her whether everything on our CV has to be gastro-related.
No, definitely not. So kind of the way that the application works is you just get a number of points for whatever you have. So
Okay.
it doesn't have to be in gastro.
Gastro themed. Okay.
So I think what I would say is use whatever you have to get the points. And if you don't have anything that's gastro related, you need to be able to speak about something gastro related. So
Right.
even if you already have the maximum number of points for research, but for, it's in cardiology and PCI or something, because you just got attached to that when you were in F1, your reg was super nice and put you on the paper, then you can maybe write a case report in gastro. So it's not going to get you any points, but it's much easier to do. And it's something that you can then speak about, because you need to have a balance between getting the points, but also showing that you are committed to the specialty and you're interested in the specialty and you are doing things to support your career in that.
So Georgie raises a key point here, which we've actually also heard from the others. There's a distinction between what gets you points on the self-assessment scoring matrix and then what you speak about at the interview, and this needs to be considered.
So we'll hear now from another trainee, Noam, who explained his thoughts on this. He's currently a gastro registrar and an ST4 at Broomfield Hospital.
I think it's really important to separate the points which you're going to get on your application and what you're going to talk about in the interview. Okay? Because the point is that once you get the points on the application, that's it. You don't need to talk about it. The whole point about the interview is selling yourself, and if you interview well, you'll get a great score. It all rises and falls on the interview. So you don't need to be locked into what you claimed 7 points for. If you've got a better story to tell about your journey in gastro that doesn't fit in with the points criteria, then tell that. You're speaking to real people. They're not going to look down and be like, oh, but you didn't mention that project which you claimed 10 points for or 6 points for, whatever.
My name's Writ Halder. I work with Noam at Broomfield and I'm currently ST5.
My name's Prateek Prasannan. I'm a ST4 at Hammersmith.
Alongside Noam were two other registrars, Writ and Prateek. We asked them what demonstrates commitment to the specialty.
There's not much compulsory clinic commitments and things like that, and I think as an IMT you're quite good and savvy at the inpatient side of medicine in the hospital. You kind of have to show your commitment to the outpatient side, and when you start your higher training, medicine, especially in gastro, most of it is outpatient. Very minimal time is spent looking after the inpatient, on the wards. Most of your consultants do most clinics, so that is a lot of the life of gastroenterologists. So I think showing that you've gone out of your way to do more clinics in gastro, I think that's one way to start, really.
One thing I'll say is there's some stuff I did that wasn't points or anything, but actually was really useful in my interview because it was gastro-based. You can talk about it and it adds to commitment, and it just seems like you want to do gastro more. So stuff like helping with data collection for some gastro research or something like that. It didn't count on any of my points. It didn't help me at all. But actually, in the interview was something to talk about. I think they enjoyed stuff like that. So
I think actually with commitment to specialties, actually it can be almost anything. So there's a really wide range in which anything goes under commitment to specialties. So if anyone's taking time out to do a gastro or liver job, that's commitment to specialty. Any gastro-related poster in a gastro-related conference is or a publication or anything. Even if you've done an audit in a gastro-related thing. When I was an IMT1, I was on a Jerry's ward, and I just ran this big constipation audit on my 15-bed Jerry's ward, and it was really fun. And I did lots of interventions about how you manage constipation in elderly Jerry's patients with delirium. And so I was using my Jerry's ward, because that's what I was working on, but actually I was thinking about the fact that I wanted to apply for gastro, and whatever you do, whatever project you do, if you make sure that it's got a gastro spin, and then you can just discuss it and say, well, even when I was working in geriatrics, I was thinking about gastro and how to manage, constipation in the elderly, which is obviously contributes to patient stay and quality of life and delirium and so on.
Georgie also had some useful tips for commitment to specialty.
My commitment was showing that, this is hard to do, but I'm dedicated to trying to do it. And I think as an IMT, the way that you can do that is to take a taster week in gastro, and with that visit endoscopy, so that you're just literally in the room for 1 or 2 procedures. You see what it actually looks like for a patient to have a scope, go down to a gastro clinic, because obviously as an IMT, you have to do 80 clinics. So they can be within gastro, and that's your commitment. I'm doing a rest job, but I'm going to gastro clinic because I'm committed to the specialty. I want to get experience. You can shadow the reg, seeing referrals for a day or something like that, and you can show that as kind of your commitment as well. So I think the key thing to show is that you didn't just do your SHO rotation in gastro. That's compulsory, you have to go to work, if it's in gastro, whatever. But you took time outside of other things, outside of your normal job to pursue interest in gastro. And you don't have to have got research in it, but at least you went there, you made an effort to go there, you spoke to people within the specialty, you got career advice from them. Coming to conferences like this shows that you're committed to the specialty, you're taking time out of your normal working day to do something that's related to gastro.
Georgie's just mentioned the idea of doing endoscopy during IMT and using this as part of the commitment to specialty section. It made us wonder whether that's necessary or how important it actually is. We asked Writ and Prateek on their experiences of endoscopy prior to applying.
When I did IMT, it was hard. There's not much structured endoscopy training really for where I did IMT anyway. I remember going on a simulation course. I think watching endoscopy is really important rather than just going in, but seeing quite high quality endoscopy from some consultants, things how they manage the room. I think that's really important as well, rather than just let me at it, let me go and, scope. Just seeing how a good endoscopist does it is also really valuable, which I think, having lost ST3 now, we're in this sort of race to get our numbers, get signed off, and we don't do that part as much. We just kind of go list, scope. So I think go and see, not necessarily have to be signed off by the time it starts. So don't get pressured for that. It's not your job. The deanery's job is to train you, so don't feel stressed. You might feel a bit of pressure or peer pressure, or they're already coming in signed off, so don't let that put you off. But if you see good endoscopy, that's really valuable.
I would say don't worry about doing any endoscopy before training. I would say you should go to endoscopy and see what it's like. Number one, because you'll be familiar with the department, then you know the consultants, and then you may be able to do more work like audits and stuff with them. The other thing is also being aware of how it works and things, because I think it's really obvious in an interview, in a clinical scenario, when someone has read about endoscopy and theoretically knows how to manage someone with a bleed versus having been there and knows the practicalities of it, it's very easy to show that in an interview, and it shows that you know what you're talking about.
Georgie was also keen to highlight the endoscopy courses that are available across the UK.
So there are some really good endoscopy taster courses. Obviously, the one that I'm going to promote the most is the BSG Endoscopy Taster, which we run every year in kind of springtime. And I know you guys both came to the London one. Maddie helped us faculty, which was very nice. There's also one in Newcastle, and we have previously run one in Birmingham, Wolverhampton, and we're looking to open more as well. So that's a really good way to show your commitment, because it's just a half day that you can book onto. You get some hands-on experience with scopes, removing some foreign bodies, putting some clips on. So that's a really good way to show commitment, and also to get a feel for using a scope and how fun gastro can be. But then there are also some other courses. So I think Homerton and Royal Free, or UCLH maybe, run some courses where you can go and have a go with the simulator. They've got very good simulators that you can have a go at scoping, and obviously it's totally safe because it's not a real person. So that's a great way to do that. And I think actually Wolverhampton maybe have something similar. I think they have a really good endoscopy department as well.
So if you've never attended endoscopy done on a real person, it can be really hard to work out how you're actually going to get involved. Georgie explained the best way to get stuck in.
I think it depends a lot on the trainer. So when I was at St George's, they said to me very clearly, you need to come and scope the model before you can come and even touch a scope for a real person. But not every hospital has endoscopy models. So I think a really good way to do it is kind of, as you say, be present in endoscopy, watch them consent the patients, watch them prep with the patients, watch them do the procedures, write the reports. So you're showing that you're keen, you're interested. And then when they finished a procedure, just ask if they can show you how the controls work, so how the tip moves when you move the wheels, and just have a go at that, literally just in the air, not in the patient, before the scope gets changed. And then progressing on from that, when the endoscopist has the scope within the stomach, that's a really wide space. That's a good position to be in, to say, is it all right if I just have a feel of how the scope moves within the stomach, because you'll then realise that the orientation is totally different because everything on the screen is reversed. So you kind of get a feel for that as well. And then progressing onto that, you can say, can I withdraw the scope? I think the most complicated part probably is the intubation, so that will be something that comes later. But first of all, just say, can I have a quick go in the stomach at like seeing how the wheels move the tip of the scope, and go from there.
Georgie's put it really well there. I was definitely a bit terrified of endoscopy, as it's a big cut of gastro and you have no idea if you're going to enjoy it or you're even going to be good at it. I can definitely recommend the BSG endoscopy course for those who are a little apprehensive, as I was.
So let's move on to the teaching section of the application. This section is divided into two: teaching experience and training and teaching.
It's clearly set out on the scoring matrix how to gain points in the teaching experience section, but it's a little bit more difficult to gain points in the training and teaching section.
Here's Prateek with a tip on this.
So I was lucky because in my F2 we had a mandatory teaching, which was train the trainers or whatever. Train the teachers?
Something like that.
That one, which scored some points. So I got that for free, essentially. I would avoid spending money for 1 or 2 points here and there. I think things change very easily. You're never guaranteed that this is going to be scoring next year. And these 1 or 2 points are not that big a deal at the end of the day, which you can make up in interview.
It's not heavily weighted.
But I would just not try and spend too much money, because I think I looked into doing some courses and I would have regretted it now where I am if I'd done them.
I definitely have to agree with Prateek there. If you have the opportunity to get a PG cert, that's amazing and there's definitely value to it. Just don't worry too much about not having one, as it's only 1 point and they're often expensive and quite time consuming. We definitely already all are underpaid and overworked anyway.
Couldn't agree more. So now moving on, we haven't spoken much about audits and QI projects, as this section is fairly self-explanatory. We've had some good advice earlier from Noam about how to use other non-gastro placements to get gastro-related QI projects. Georgie also has some good tips on this.
If you're doing IMT and you don't have a gastro job, just go down to the department, speak to them. People have to do audits every year. Like if you're in a centre that has a liver department, then they have to do their IQL standards every year. So that's quality standards in liver services. So they have to be meeting those things. So they're always going to be auditing admissions of decompensated cirrhotics, the management of SBP. The National GI Bleed audit is done every single year. So, you can just go early and say, when are you doing these audits? Can I help to collect the data? Do you have anything that you need doing? Even if you're on ITU, pretty much everyone is fed NG. So, that's nutrition, that's still gastro. So there's loads of stuff that you can get involved in, speak to the dietitians. Is there anything that they need to do?
Nice.
So just sit down early is basically what I would say.
And finally today we've got George, an IMT3 who's just secured an ST4 training job in gastroenterology and spoke to us about publications. This is one of the most difficult categories to gain application points. We asked him for his tips on finding opportunities and getting things published.
I think publication opportunities are around everywhere. You just have to kind of ask for them. In my, albeit limited experience, quite often the projects that you say yes to that you think are going to result in a publication quite often don't, and sometimes peter out, or it's really difficult to get something published. And then other times you will be involved in something and you don't think it's going anywhere, and then before you know it, you've got a publication out of it. I found it really, really difficult to kind of predict. My strategy earlier on during my training was just to say yes to everything and throw myself into it and ask around. And I found that if you did smaller projects for people, then they would be more likely to offer bigger projects, or if they trust you, and then you're much more likely to be involved in the more sort of publishable projects as well. So I did find that a little bit, and I found that if I approached people at the start of a year in training, so if I was at a DGH for a year, if I started that process early, by the end of the year you might have had a couple of opportunities to do something which potentially could be published. And quite a lot of the stuff I didn't get published, and you might end up with a poster, which is still fantastic and something to talk about. I have published a couple of letters, like when I was a medical student, that I did kind of took on and did myself. And then the other stuff that I published, I've been involved in teams that have done, we've worked as a collaborative project and ended up with something published. And to be honest, you need someone who's really wants to drive the project forward. So whether that's you or someone else in the team, you have to kind of have someone that's willing to go above and beyond, work out of hours to sort it out and really push it, because otherwise it's really tricky. And I think if you're really keen to get something done, you sometimes have to step up to be that person. Even if you don't have experience in doing it, you have to ask your consultant or Reg that's sort of on the project with you, how do I push this forward? What can I do? Who can I send this off to get some feedback? What's the next step in publishing it? And you have to kind of drive that yourself, because it doesn't just happen by accident.
So it's a really useful advice from George there. But before we freak everyone out because they didn't publish letters as a medical student, we'd like to end the episode on something a little bit lighter, with some good advice from Prateek to his younger self.
I think maybe don't stress about it too much. I think I used to be really worried, like, I don't have enough in my portfolio. I don't have this. I didn't do that much, and I still got through it. And I think you can. I think you just need to get the, make sure you're doing something, make sure you're doing some gastro stuff, make sure you're trying to tick the boxes, but don't stress too much because it'll work out.
And that finishes today's episode. We really hope you've enjoyed it. Just like to say a massive thanks to Georgie, Writ, Noam, Prateek and George for their contributions to the episode today.
So if you have enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate us on Apple Podcasts or comment on Spotify. And obviously, please share it with your friends that may be interested.
As we mentioned earlier, we've included some useful links in the episode description.
We'll be back soon with our next episode where we talk about the dreaded interview. But in the meantime, we have lots of other episodes in our back catalogue that you can listen to.
So I've been Maddie.
And I've been Maya.
And we'll see you next month. Bye.